It is more important than ever right now in this time that we support LGBTQ kids during their coming out process.
Are you the parent of an LGBTQIA plus child? Well, today's guest says congratulations, but he also says it's going to be a bumpy ride. Let's meet today's guest now. I am absolutely delighted to introduce you to John Sovec. John is a licensed marriage and family therapist, a coach, a counselor, an author, a speaker. John, you're really busy. Welcome. Hello. I'm happy you're
Thank,
here.
thank you so much. And the reason I'm busy is because there is so much work to do to get this information out to parents, to teachers, to everyone about how to support queer kids in their coming out process.
Well, let's start at the very, very beginning. For those who don't know, LGBTQIA plus. What does that mean?
So we're looking at L is for lesbian, G is for gay, LGB, B is for bisexual, T is transgender, Q can be queer or questioning, I is intersex, and A can be asexual, or like we're having the conversation today, and I'm kind of sensing you are, an ally, someone who's there to support our community and be active in speaking up when our needs are being addressed.
Thank you for that, because, a lot of times people don't really understand what all of that means. Let me ask you this. I want to start with talking about your book for just a second. The name of your book is Out, and it provides support to parents of children who are really just beginning to come out. And so we don't have time to go into all the details of what is a great amount of detail in your book Out. But what I do want to ask you to tell us now, particularly during these really trying times, is how does a parent begin to support a child who comes out, even if the parent doesn't understand, or I'm going to put the word agree in quotes, because we know there's still a lot of that going around.
So for me, the easiest thing for any parent to understand is simply love your child. I talk about this in the book, that when your kid comes to you and maybe they start to hint or they start to give a conversation about coming out to you, the most important thing you can do as a parent in that moment is to open your arms wide, hug your child close, and tell them that you love them. That foundation is going to help both of you and the entire family get through all the highs and lows, the ups and downs of this coming out process. Because let's face it, it may be your kid who's coming out, but it is a family process of coming out.
And, I think back on some of the folks who I've worked with over the years, and I can't tell you some of the horror stories that I've heard about adults coming out to their parents and really getting booted out of the family has been one common experience. And the other one has been, oh yeah, we knew, we were just waiting for you to tell us. So it's like everything and anything in between. One of the things that you identify in Out is a 3-step process. And you describe that as introspection, identification, and integration. Before we talk about that, one of the things that you also say in your book is your own awareness of yourself about the age of 8. Can you say a little bit more about that?
Well, you're meeting me for the first time today, but you might have already guessed I'm kind of a sunny, optimistic person. And even as a young kid, I moved out with a lot of big energy. And I looked at my friends. I saw how they were interacting with all of our other friends. And I realized, well, I had an attraction to other people like me, other guys. And that wasn't what I was seeing for everybody else. But remember, at 8 years old, you're not acting out on that. You're not really doing much with it.
Right.
So that kind of got parked, put aside for a little bit. And it wasn't until I would say I was starting to go into puberty in my teens and high school where I started having more attractions that it really started to be something that was, I had to look at this. I had to understand what it meant and to know what it was like for me as a gay boy to want to date other boys. Not the easiest thing to do in high school for anybody, but especially not for gay kids.
Years ago, and I wish I could remember the name of the book and the author, but he talked about the fact that children as young as 4 really do have a sense of what's true for them. And so, nowadays, of course, you're hearing all kinds of things about, children don't know, people don't know, they have to wait until they're, I don't know, a million to be certain of who they are and how they are. What do you say to those people?
So, most of our stories about our sexual orientation and our gender identity when we're little are handed us to by our family, by our community, by our spiritual communities. So, we are told by others that this is who we are supposed to be. But what's the biggest thing that we learn as kids? We're supposed to create our identity. We're supposed to become fully realized human beings. So, in that process, we are going to examine our own relationship to our sexual identity and our sexual orientation. And so, these are just pieces of a puzzle of how all of us mature and grow into fully realized human beings.
I just a moment ago referenced the three-step process that you talk about in your book. And give us the title of your book again, if you would.
So, the book is called Out, A Parent's Guide to Supporting Your LGBTQIA plus kid through coming out and beyond. And there's an exclamation point on that. And my publisher made me do that because the book is so chock full of information.
So, speaking of information, three-step process. Walk us through the first step, if you would. What does that introspection process entail?
For any LGBTQ kid, like I said earlier, when I realized what I was feeling, the sensations of myself didn't agree with what everybody else was doing, I go inside, I go internal. This
Mhm,
introspection is me looking inside myself to see, well, what does this mean? How
mhm,
does this play out in my world?
mhm.
Oftentimes when I work with kids and families that are coming out and they say, hi, my name's so and so and I'm gay, one of my first questions back is, well, what does that mean for you in your world? So it is this idea of we look inside, we find out what it would mean to live that fully realized identity. We take a lot of cues from what's happening around us, and that's a space of real discovery.
And even I mean, I can't imagine in today's world how difficult in the world, period, but certainly in today's world to say, "Hi, I'm gay." W What do you wanna tell those children who are brave enough and courageous enough to know that and to say that out loud?
So let's put it this way, coming out is actually a lifelong process. I mean, if you think of us meeting today and me meeting all of your listeners, I have to come out to do this interview, to get this information out into the world. And it's a process. It is ongoing. There are times where it's safer and easier, where I know I'm in very protective, supportive environments. There are other times when I'm doing trainings or speaking or doing a media interview that is not a friendly environment. But I have to know who I am and realize that it's not just about coming out, but it's also inviting other people in to learn from my story and my experience so they can have a more powerful process for themselves.
Let me ask you to give us a thumbnail understanding of the second step, of your process.
Identification.
Yes.
So that's when we've done all that internal stuff and we start to realize, oh, I'm queer, I'm bi, I'm non binary. I am now recognizing that part of myself. And I start to identify with that piece of who I am. And often in this phase, it'll be kind of like, that is all I am. It's like the top of the list. If I said, Pamela, tell me three things about yourself and you're just coming out, my bisexual identity would be number one on that list. But it's also a space where we're starting to build friendships. We're starting to look into the community that identifies with us. We're starting to explore different types of music and literature and friendships. This may even be when we start to be curious about the potential of relationship. So this is when we've said inside, I now know who I am. I want to see how the world reflects that back to me and where I find, as I mentioned earlier, kind of my safe spaces.
Folks, by now, I'm going to believe that you are already hearing about things that you've not thought about. You're getting information that is new to you. You are, in fact, experiencing what M.E.S.H is all about. I'm going to ask you to like, subscribe, and share today's conversation with all of those who you believe you care about. and who you believe are important in your life. Let's return back to the conversation with John. John, before we started talking today, I commented that we weren't going to have a political conversation, but in today's environment, it's so hard to not at least say a tiny bit about what's going on in our world socially and politically. And what do you say to the parents who are really terrified for the physical safety of their children, let alone the emotional and social safety?
If I were going to step in with a very kind of foundational level of that question, it is to encourage parents to find community support, to find support on that grassroots level, to find people that you can talk openly with about, whether it's other family members or friends or other parents, to create a community of care around your family and around your kid who's coming out. Because you're right, the bigger, louder, screaming voices of the world right now are telling us that the LGBTQ community, myself, my identity is not okay and not valid. But if we turn to each other and find that connection locally, integrated into our hearts, we're going to be able to walk through this incredibly difficult period in our history.
You know, one of the things that I said very early on, before we actually met, was quoting your comment in your book Out, in which you said to parents, congratulations. Let's talk about the trust and the safety that a child would have to even begin to have that conversation with the parent. That's congratulations worthy for sure.
Absolutely. And you have to understand that, like, I grew up in a family where my parents were very supportive of who I was. But I actually had to have that day, like, I think it was around 16-ish, where I actually said, I am gay. But my little heart was beating a mile a minute. I was sweating. I was like anxious. My heart was I couldn't center myself, even knowing that I would be loved and affirmed. So every kid who is in that moment, every person who's in that moment of coming out is feeling that anxiety. And so if we can learn to talk more openly, more freely, more easily about this part of the human experience, we can make it such a supportive thing for everybody. Am I naive in that hope? A little bit, maybe, but that's what the purpose of the book is, to open up these bigger conversations so we can realize that my attractions, which are only a very small part of my gay identity, are not harmful to anybody else, and that it is a beautiful, let's take the word, a beautiful rainbow of experience that the LGBTQ community brings to the world.
The parents who are listening and who have heard you say, got it. My kid loves me, loves us, trusts us, came out, shared this with us. I got it. I'm scared. I think I want my child to keep this a secret at school. What do I say to my child about what bathroom to go to? And what a crazy conversation to have to be having anyway, but that's another conversation for another day. Talk to the parent who's afraid for their child to say anything to anybody outside of the house.
So, what I would say is, don't just tell your child, but have a conversation. Listen to them as well. It may be too painful for them to try and hide and disguise who they are. So, you're going to have to work together as a family to create issues of safety. And I work with queer kids every single day. And one of the conversations I have with them right now is, it is not easy, and it is not safe, and it is scary out there. And so you do need to examine every space that you're in for your own personal safety. And these are bits of awareness that I think parents do need to bring into conversations. But y'all, if you're raising teenagers or kids, you know, if you say you cannot do this thing, even though it's to keep you safe, what are they going to do?
Right.
The exact opposite.
Exactly.
So having the conversation, how can we help you feel safer at school? How can we help you feel safer on the soccer field? How can we help you feel safer walking to and from out in the neighborhood? How can we help you feel safer inside the family unit itself, including extended family? Those two-way conversations, and actually multiple ways conversation, because I believe the whole family, everybody, mom, dad, other kids, any type of family situation, everybody has to be involved in this process.
The parent who is listening and says, I love my child. I got it. I heard it. But that's not how I grew up. And I really don't agree with all of this stuff. Talk to that parent.
Oftentimes, I hear that particular conversation from parents who have a very strong spiritual system. And there's a technique that I use, and I do talk about it in the book. And it is for you as a parent, if this question is coming up because of your religious beliefs, to take yourself into a very quiet space, not talking to the pastor, to the rabbi, to the deacon, but going by yourself and closing your eyes and opening your heart and praying to your God and asking your God, what do I do for my child?
Mm.
And every parent who I have given this exercise to comes back and says, the ultimate answer I get from my God is to love my child. All of the other stuff is chatter and noise. So that's why I encourage them to go into a deeper place to realize, remember when you had your kid, you signed a contract that you were going to be with them for a lifetime.
Right.
And stepping into that deeper, oh, my job is to love my child. That's a really great place for parents to begin to find their own way through this story.
Is there an age range at which you find children have a easier or more difficult time of acknowledging who they are and what they care about?
I would say the thing that I find the most, if I have kids who are not in supportive family environment through their teens and they do not feel safe to come out, it is a tougher journey for them because they will come out later in life.
Uh-huh.
And what happens when we come out later in life, we kind of have to reset our entire life story. People around us are going to feel betrayed or hurt. We're not going to feel or understand how to work with the mechanisms of the world around us. So people who are not able to come out in that really beautiful process that happens when we're developing as kids and adolescents that have to do it later in life, that can be a really challenging experience for a lot of them.
Not something that you necessarily address in your book Out, but for those older adults who lived the life their parents told them was the right life to live. So they got married, not necessarily to the person, to the gender that was a good fit for them, but who they were told they needed to marry. What do you say to those folks?
This, once again, returns back to that concept of love. If you and your partner are still able to speak in a loving way, and I do have adults who have lived these full experiences of life, partnered up, kids, all of the stuff we're told we're supposed to want, the white picket fence, the house in the suburbs, the golden retriever, all of those things we're told. And then they realize, I can't do this anymore. In these loving relationships, they're able to go to their partner. I've actually helped to create spaces where these conversations can happen. They say, this is who I am. I've always loved you. And there's this other aspect of myself that I need to respect and bring to the forefront now. So there can be ways that this can work really effectively and very openly and in a very loving way. Some of the people I've worked with, they're still great friends with their exes. They're great relationships with their kids because they brought more of their authentic self forward. So it can happen. And yeah, the other can happen too, where someone may be completely rejected and torn out of a family unit. But that is also when we need to look inside and decide, I need to live my authentic life. And if I've only got 20 years left, I want to do those 20 years as my authentic self.
John, there's so much that you have to say and so little time in which to say it here. I know that there are folks who want to reach out to you for more information. Let's start with how one can get a copy of Out, A Parent's Guide. Where do they go?
So Out is available online, easier through your major retailers. I always encourage you have a local bookstore you like, request it there. Shopping local, it's kind of one of my big things too. Okay. So yeah, you can find it online and also request it from your local bookstore.
And you have a website. You are a licensed marriage and family therapist. You do a lot of work. You work with a lot of people. You're speaking, you're writing. Website.
So you can find me at johnsovec.com. That's JOHNSOVEC.com. And you can also find me at gayteentherapy.com, secondary site I have running specifically for people who are looking for that type of information. But go to the johnsovec.com. It's got lots of great information there.
And I have to thank you as we close out our conversation today. You have shared a great deal of information with us today, and I do thank you so much for that.
Thank you for having me today.
Absolutely. It's been a delight. Folks, what you have been listening to today is part of what M.E.S.H is all about. It is about bringing you information and helping you to grow your own awareness, deepen perhaps your own insights about you and the world in which you live. I'm going to ask you to like, to follow, to share this program. Press the button. You are the reason this program stays alive. You are the reason that I'm here every week. And I do look forward to seeing you next week. You take care.